Pop quiz hotshot. Someone cuts the line in the grocery store. What do? Do you quietly fume? Or do you stand up and defend the honor of everyone in line like some sort of grocery store vigilante? This behavior has a name: justice sensitivity. And it's something I see a lot in my patients with ADHD and AuDHD. Being keenly attuned to the injustices of the world can have some really big benefits, but not always. Some of my patients find themselves exploding when they think they've been wronged. Others go on crusades to right systemic issues, but end up hurting themselves in the process. Still, others can't read the newspaper without being sent into a spiral of despair. Just the thought of injustice is too much to handle. So today, let's talk about what justice sensitivity is, how it affects our lives in both helpful and harmful ways, and why it's much more common for people with ADHD and AuDHD. And of course, I'll end with some strategies for managing justice sensitivity so you don't get banned from the grocery store. This is ADHD and, where we talk about everyday life and ADHD. I'm your host, Dr. J. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with those with ADHD. If you constantly hear, "You take everything so personally," this episode is for you. So what is justice sensitivity? Let's start with a definition. Justice sensitivity is the tendency to notice injustice and to have intense cognitive, emotional, and behavioral reactions to it. People with high justice sensitivity don't just notice unfairness. They notice it more often, they ruminate on it longer, and they feel a stronger pull to do something about it. And here's the thing. Research confirms this is significantly more common in people with ADHD, particularly those with the inattentive subtype. One study found that compared to a control group, people with ADHD scored notably higher on justice sensitivity measures, especially in what researchers call observer sensitivity and beneficiary sensitivity. That means you can find it deeply uncomfortable to witness unfairness towards others and may also find it uncomfortable to receive an unfair benefit. There are two other types of justice sensitivity as well. Victim sensitivity is a strong reaction to being treated unfairly yourself, and perpetrator sensitivity is distress over having caused harm, even unintentionally. In the same study, people with inattentive ADHD showed elevated justice sensitivity across all four types. Now, you might be thinking, those all sound like good things. And honestly, you're not wrong. There are real benefits to being someone who cares about fairness. Let's start with the upside. Justice sensitivity can make you a fierce advocate. It's the engine behind a lot of social movements, charitable work, and genuine human progress. Research and clinical observation both suggest that neurodivergent people are drawn to helping professions, advocacy roles, and caregiving at higher rates. And it makes sense. When you feel the pain of injustice viscerally, you're often the first person to show up for someone who's been wronged. Justice sensitivity can also make you more attuned to other people's experiences, better at detecting hypocrisy, and more motivated to create environments that actually work for everyone. That's not nothing. That's a real strength. But here's where it gets complicated. Justice sensitivity can also produce reactions that are out of proportion, unhealthy, and just plain hard to live with. There's the rage response, where a small slight or perceived unfairness triggers a full emotional explosion that can damage relationships or get you in trouble at work. There's a despair response, where the weight of injustice in the world, especially injustice that you can't fix, sends you into depression or hopelessness. There's the crusade response, where you throw yourself into fixing every problem you encounter until you've burned yourself completely out. And there's the doom scrolling response, where every news cycle is a trap you can't escape from because your brain keeps pulling you back towards the outrage. The real world impacts can be significant. Trouble with authority figures is one of the biggest ones I see clinically. When rules feel arbitrary or when someone in power makes a call that feels unfair, the justice sensitive ADHD brain doesn't always filter between I feel this and I'm gonna say this. That can cost people jobs, relationships, and opportunities. There's also the anxiety and depression that builds when injustice feels everywhere and your capacity to address it runs out. And there's the relational toll of being the person who can't let things go, even when everyone else has moved on. It's genuinely frustrating that the instinct to make the world fair can lead to these outcomes, but it doesn't make you a bad person. It means your brain works a certain way. So let's talk about why. A few things are happening here, and they layer on top of each other. The first is emotional dysregulation. In the ADHD brain, the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala works differently. The prefrontal cortex is the brain's executive, the part that pumps the brakes and says, let's think about this. The amygdala is your emotional alarm system. In ADHD, that top-down regulation is less reliable, which means emotional responses, including the response to perceived injustice, hits faster and harder. The brain doesn't just register an unfair situation, it floods. The second is how ADHD affects attention. Research on anger and ADHD shows that when anger is triggered, people with ADHD have a harder time shifting their attention away from what provoked it. Anger narrows focus for everyone, but when you add ADHD's attention system into the mix, that narrowing becomes a lock. You don't just notice the injustice, you can't stop noticing it. You replay it, you zoom in on it, you connect it to every similar thing that's ever happened. That's your attention system doing what it does, just pointed at something painful. This is why learning emotion regulation is so important. The third is impulsivity. When the emotional system fires quickly and the regulatory system is slower to respond, the result is often action before reflection. That's the outburst that happens before you've thought through whether this is the hill that you want to die on. The DBT concept of acting from emotion mind is very relevant here. When we're fully in our feelings without any input from our rational mind, we skip the part where we ask whether our reaction fits the situation. And the fourth, and honestly the one I find most meaningful, is lived experience. The world was not built with neurodivergent people in mind. If you have ADHD, there's a very good chance that you've experienced a significant amount of actual injustice. Being labeled lazy, being misunderstood, being punished for how your brain works, watching others succeed in systems that didn't account for your needs. When you spent years encountering real unfairness that you couldn't control, your sensitivity to injustice makes complete sense. You've had a lot of practice noticing it. And when you find a situation where you can actually do something, where you can be the one who makes it right, that pull can be very difficult to resist. So how do you manage justice sensitivity? I want to give you two different sets of tools here. Things you can do in the moment when you feel it rising, and things that you can do more generally to keep it from running your life. Let's start with in the moment. The first thing is to simply take a beat. When you notice the heat of injustice starting to rise, your nervous system needs a second before your mouth or your actions get involved. Slow your breathing down. If you've heard me talk about paced breathing before, this is exactly when you'll use it. Exhale longer than you inhale. That activates the parasympathetic nervous system and starts to bring your physiological response down. The second thing is to interrogate your own reaction. What is actually making you feel this way? The specific situation in front of you? Or is it also everything that rhymes with the situation that ever happened to you? Sometimes what looks like a response to one thing is actually a response to 20 things. Knowing the difference helps you respond appropriately rather than proportionately to the entire pile. The third thing is to interrogate your perspective. Are you seeing the full picture? Justice sensitivity can sometimes cast us as the judge, the jury, and the executioner all at once, especially in victim sensitivity situations where we feel personally wronged. Slowing down enough to genuinely ask, am I missing something here? Isn't betraying your values. It's making sure your values are actually being applied well. And the fourth is to get clear on your goal. Do you want to express how you feel? Do you want to start a dialogue? Do you want to create change? Your approach should match your goal. Reacting from pure emotion mind rarely gets you what you want. There are also things you can do generally that can set you up for success. First is to set real limits on media consumption. I know you know this. I also know that it's much easier said than done for a brain that's wired to chase stimulating, emotionally charged content. But doom scrolling and justice sensitivity are a dangerous combination. The social media algorithm is not your friend here. It is specifically designed to serve you content that provokes a reaction. Being intentional about when and how long you're engaging with news and social media is an act of self-protection. Build proactive channels for your justice drive. One of the most effective things that I've seen clinically is when people with high justice sensitivity stop waiting until they feel rage and despair and instead build ongoing, sustainable ways to engage with causes that they care about. Volunteering regularly, donating to organizations whose work you trust, participating in advocacy in ways that fit your capacity. This keeps the drive active and purposeful without requiring a crisis to spark it. And invest in your broader emotional regulation toolkit. The better you are at regulation in general, the more access you'll have to your rational mind when the justice response fires. That's therapy, that's DBT skills, that's physical movement, sleep, all the unglamorous stuff that actually works. Justice sensitivity at its core reflects something real and valuable about who you are. The world does have injustice in it. People do get mistreated, and having a brain that notices and cares about that is not the problem. The problem is when the response gets bigger than the situation or bigger than your body and relationships can sustain. The goal isn't to stop caring, it's to wield that care well. Tell me in the comments if justice sensitivity is something you experience. I always love hearing how you all navigate this stuff in your actual lives. That's it for this episode of ADHD and. If today resonated with you, check out our episode on ADHD and rejection sensitivity, where we dig into how ADHD can amplify fears of rejection. A lot of the same nervous system dynamics are at play. Thanks so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe for more ADHD resources and support like this.